Good vibrations.
And you are locked to episode 153. My guest today is Brandon Martin. We're crossing over to the US. This dude is the proprietor of Skatopia in Ohio. We'll be finding out about that. He's a freedom activist, speaker, researcher, and event organizer. Brandon, welcome on, brother.
Thank you, Mark. And I really appreciate that you invited me on this show. I've been looking forward to it for quite some time now.
No worries. So there's a couple of main subject areas we wanted to cover today. The first one is the event that you're putting together for the end of May 2020. That is S.E.E.D for Growth. We'll get into that. And in the second part of this chat, we want to talk about the punk rock scene, or what you're dubbing the fake-ass punk movement, and tying that into the whole freedom anarchist community and discussing what may be going on with aspects of that. But let's get into the event first of all. Before we do that, actually, I just want to ask you about Skatopia. That sounds like an interesting project. Maybe you want to tell people what that's all about to set the scene for going on to talk about the event.
No problem. Skatopia is a world-famous skateboard park located in southern Ohio, created by my father, Bruce Martin, who was a professional skateboarder for most of his life. He got together with about 50 other skaters who wanted to get away from the regulations and restrictions that government was bringing down upon individuals like ourselves who were just trying to live free. And Skatopia is kind of a DIY lifestyle specifically. So we do it ourselves. We go out and we gather resources and we work with what we got, and we build some pretty amazing things out here. We have a vast variety of different styles of skate obstacles, one of which is our most famous, which is located in our barn, which is over 100 years old. The bowl itself is obviously not 100 years old, only the structure that it resides in. We are also home to one of the world's biggest collections of skateboard history, which we have boards dating back to the mid-1920s. One of the first manufactured skateboards was coming out in 1920s. A lot of people think skateboarding came out in the 1950s, which it did not. So we have a museum out here that probably has over 13,000 pieces, which include accessories, magazines, boards, videos, etc. Skatopia became famous because of the two big events that we hold annually each year: Bowl Bash and Backwoods Blowout, which we bring in people from all over the world who come to co-experience and meet like-minded people, and also to help to further the cause, bring people in, and everybody comes in and does voluntary work and tries to help make this place better each time and every time they come. And it's also a place that you can come and leave your mark on, so that you know that you've created something and it's going to be there for other people to experience. So we get a lot of artists, we get a lot of like-minded individuals. They're not just skateboarders. We don't just bring in skateboarders. So we're open to all people as long as you're not doing any harm, and that's how it's always been. We've had over 1,000 bands play at this location, bands from like War to Jello Biafra, who's the lead singer for Dead Kennedys. We definitely stay generally in the circles of punk, hardcore, metal, and heavy metal music or genres. But, we get a vast variety of other genres as well, from hip-hop to folk music and things like that. We don't try to segregate. We try to bring in whatever the people are interested in. And I try personally, when I'm the booker, because a lot of times I'm organizing these events and being the booker for the events, I try to bring in bands who are speaking about a message of truth, love, or freedom. Someone who's actually saying something worthwhile and worth listening to, not just something that you can drown yourself out into a hedonistic mindset and just forget about all the iniquities and inequities going on in the world. With that being said, if you are interested in checking out more about Skatopia, you're welcome to go to skatopia.org. And there's plenty of videos to show kind of the raw lifestyle that we do live. But I will give a little caveat to that those videos that you're watching are only a small portion of actually what goes on out here, specifically during the events. So you'll find videos of people, drinking to skating to partying, all kinds of different things. But, that most of the time out here, it's just a few family members and a couple residents that are living and just trying to, live free and to build something great. So it's actually pretty calm. So a lot of the videos are very exciting, and there's a lot of energy going around and things like that. But most of the time, it's just a pretty chill, just a quiet farm with dogs running around and things like that. People showing up on the weekends to skate. But other than that, we have these events twice a year, so a lot of the media focalizes on these events, and it kind of gives a skewed idea about what the place is really like during the off days and stuff like that. So if you came out here today or, any normal day, it would just be a few people, doing a lot of hard work, trying to live their lives, trying to build something awesome as far away from government as possible, which is always constantly trying to hammer down on the individual's rights and liberties. This can lead us into a little bit of my background. I was personally raised as a anarchist, more so, but slightly libertarian because of my father's lifestyle and rebellious nature. He was a pretty intelligent person who was very well read and knew how to gather people towards a cause and to actually rally them towards getting motivated about being active in the world and trying to get something good done, and trying to bring people together to create a dream and to fulfill that dream and see that potential manifest. My father had me reading books like 1984 and A Brave New World by the time I was 12. I had read things like The Hobbit. He actually used to read me The Satanic Witch and The Satanic Bible to put me to sleep at night, which I thought was highly interesting when I found that out, but it makes a lot of sense, because I did steer towards Satanism at a certain level until I found out what it was actually about and its interconnected worldwide agenda to actually bring in a more perfected state of slavery. I definitely grew up indulged and directly influenced by the punk scene. I got to see Gigi Allen when I was very young. I used to go to see bands like Agnostic Front. I remember one time when I was there, I was on his shoulders, and the lead singer of Agnostic Front stopped the entire show and pointed at my dad and me and said, "That is a hell of a father," or something along those lines, which, was very interesting growing up in that lifestyle, So I was raised as a punk. I was raised as an anarchist. I grew up in the backyard underground scene of these movements, and I have firsthand experience and gnosis of the underground punk and metal scene. But to me, something never quite sat right within my conscience about what was going on, considering that these people were acting like they were rebels, but it didn't seem like they had any true movement towards actual freedom. And I always questioned their state of consciousness, going back to the Gigi Allen incident, where, I got to see Gigi for like 5 seconds, and then he was ripped away by the order followers, by the police. And even within that amount of time, I still just had enough intelligence to really question what was going on within this movement. So I was definitely not sheltered in any way or any form by my father. While most kids were being censored and eyes being covered by their parents' hands, my dad was showing me exactly what the real world was, and without hesitation, pushing me right into growing up very quickly, which I think is a very big benefit and a big reason why I have walked the path that I have when it comes to freedom and spirituality. One more side note about my life is that I got to travel an immense amount when I was young. So I was multicultural. I got to go all over Europe. I've been to 49 states in America over and over. I've been to Canada, to Mexico. I've been to multiple different countries. And because of this, it really helped my educational process, especially being homeschooled and also being raised in such a chaotic and raw lifestyle.
Okay. Sounds like you got some stories to tell there. You're tying together skating, punk rock, and natural law and personal sovereignty and freedom. That's a pretty unique combination of aspects. I can't imagine there's many setups in the world that tie those various things together. Sounds like a pretty unique operation you got there.
Absolutely. I mean, I've been trying to use this place as a symbolic representation of true freedom for many years now, especially since I came online to, like Mark Passio's work, who influenced me greatly later in my life once I got a hold of that material. His work really solidified a lot of the principles that I was raised on. So like what you're talking about, natural law, spirituality, and sovereignty and things like that, I've been really trying to push those through Skatopia for a long time. Now, I'd say the earlier days of Skatopia were definitely more of the order out of chaos mentality, where a lot of the people that were coming were just, self-driven and trying to do their own thing for themselves. They didn't really have any real direction or motive besides to actually be able to live away from the current iniquities and the oppressive, arbitrary laws of the state. Even though I was raised as a freedom fighter, I definitely went through my own tribulations and trials and errors of life, learning through gnosis. Had to pull myself out of a deep hedonistic trance that I was in during my teens and 20s, but it didn't take that much work because I had already had a lot of education and done a lot of shadow work when I was growing up. I had been working with my shadow since I was a young kid, so it wasn't really that hard for me. And contrary to what most people believe and what most people think, I didn't really go down that path to the extreme that most people probably would have if they were raised in this kind of life. But once I fully came online, I started to see more and more of what was going on around me, especially in the punk and metal community and even skateboard community. So I wanted to counteract that by kind of transmuting that energy and those ideas into something positive. So I took a step into trying to help people elevate into self-mastery and to help them see the errors in their way and the illogical way of approaching trying to manifest freedom, which was completely blatantly obvious by this point in my life, which can only happen when an individual fully understands and applies natural law principles into one's own life.
Sure. And Skatopia is down in Athens, Ohio, is that right? Nearest big city would be, Columbus?
It's about 20 minutes away from Athens, Ohio. But Athens, Ohio is actually where I'll be holding the S.E.E.D conference at the Baker University.
Okay, well, let's talk about that. So the event is taking place from the 29th to the 31st of May 2020. I'm greatly looking forward to that one. I'm coming over for it. I'm looking forward to doing a talk and a conscious music DJ set. You've got a whole bunch of other speakers on there, a whole bunch of other events happening. What's this event all about in a nutshell then? Before we get into the nitty-gritty of who's going to be there, what's the overall ethos of it and the original inspiration behind putting this together? And also, how many of them have there been so far? How many previous ones?
Well, Mark, S.E.E.D is a 2-day conference featuring a proactive approach to spreading significant knowledge about consciousness, mind control, truth, spirituality, the occult, sovereignty, anarchy, and how they all relate to the universal problems that we're currently facing as a species. But in a nutshell, pretty much it is about teaching natural law principles so that we can end the current condition of slavery and bring about the manifestation of freedom. S.E.E.D is an acronym which stands for Studying, Educating, Enlightening, and Discerning. And my ambitions and aspirations for the conference was to bring together like-minded people to help them to see that they're not alone, to also build bridges with each other, and to strengthen the overall community. My idea was, I'm not seeing enough of this type of information being presented in the music community or the skateboard community. And since I was a part of the skateboard community, I felt that it became my moral obligation to share this information with individuals that were lacking in such knowledge. So my idea was to use the tools and the resources to my advantage, like an alchemist, to help to accelerate and push forward in the one great work. Since I had the skills and the resources to do so, I decided to hold the conference out of my own compound for free for 3 years prior to this one. And though these ones weren't as big as the S.E.E.D 4 conference that we're about to have, they turned out very well. I had a lot of support. A lot of people came. The knowledge that was shared was immaculate. It was just an overall success each year, and it continues to grow and to be more successful every year. So I decided that I wanted to expand this year and take it to a college university and try to kind of do an infiltration into the academic area, specifically in a college, and try to get through to these kids that are going to these schools, because I feel like, this knowledge should be incorporated into academia. I would like to continue to have these conferences for free so that anybody can have access to it, but to actually expand and get into different areas or locations like a college campus, you have to pay for the services that are being provided. But mainly, this is an educational approach to help people get the tools that they need to fight against the current iniquities and inequities that we're all facing, to help raise consciousness by reaching people's hearts and minds and freeing their minds, which can only be done by the individual themselves.
All right, so what would you say have been the most valuable aspects of the previous events so far?
I would definitely say the most valuable aspects of the event are the people who come, the guests that show up and help support this overall cause in a holistic way. It has been so wonderful to engage with so many like-minded people and see that we are not alone in this fight for freedom. Another aspect that I really appreciated was that my whole family helped supported and actually decided to participate as speakers in the event, which was very amazing, and they actually will be participating in the next S.E.E.D conference also. So my whole family started to awaken probably around the same time, or at least get on the path of being proactive with boots on the ground around the same time. And that was really powerful to see that happen. My plan is to hold 7 of these conferences, and that is symbolically associated with the 7-color spectrum, the 7 chakras, and the 7 circles of the seed of life, and every other 7 that you can come across. So 7 is a sacred number, and it is the path of midness. It is the path of balance. It is one of the most important numbers that we can understand when it comes to numerology and gematria, in my point of view personally. The entirety of the event was beautiful, and I just loved how many people came to co-create it. I had so much support, and it gave me the resolve that I needed to actually be successful in it. And obviously the success that I'm talking about is helping to educate and enlighten other people to this knowledge in the hope that they will take it and nourish it, just like we have to nourish a seed. So the idea was to plant the seeds into the minds of the people and into their subconscious mind so that they may, at whatever time that they can or will, start to nourish that seed so it can take root and they can grow great fruits with their labor from it.
Well, it all sounds like the great basis for an event, and there really aren't many of this nature around anymore following the demise of Free Your Mind. The Free Your Mind conference certainly appears to be no more. The last one was 2017. There's been a few other events dotted about here and there. Obviously, there's Anarchapulco down there in Mexico. There's Anarchadelphia that started last year. I know there have been some issues surrounding those events. Won't get into them, but yeah, I mean, I would have expected that every major city in the US and beyond would have a conference event centered around truth and freedom by now. You would at least expect the likes of New York, LA, Chicago, Atlanta, Miami, these big cities to be addressing all this stuff, but you're very hard-pressed to find any events of this nature. You've got to look really hard for them, which is quite surprising to me in 2020. I mean, how do you feel about the lack of events of this nature that there are to be found?
I think it's absolutely astounding that we don't find more events like this or like Free Your Mind. And to me, it shows the absolute state of ignorance that humanity has dove face first into. Most people have their head firmly in the sand and their asses in the air. And it's just absolutely deplorable. I mean, like you're talking about, these bigger cities in this country alone don't have events like this. For me personally, I live in a very poor area, and I don't have many resources myself, but yet I have found a way to put on an event like this and to sacrifice a lot of the things that most people would never sacrifice, a lot of my comforts, a lot of the things that most people aren't willing to give up to actually get a message of truth across to people. But, you know, in bigger cities where people are making a little bit more money and they may have the ability and resources to actually put on events like this, you just don't see them taking that effort. And to me, that's just quite a shame and quite astounding. But honestly, I'm not shocked. I'm not shocked at the fact that people just don't care enough to actually want to organize anything like this. And this goes for people who actually have knowledge like this. They would rather just sit back and withhold that knowledge. They would rather just continue to keep people at arm's length and not actually try to build any type of strong community to fight against the current powers that be. And that shows the lack of courage and the lack of the sacred masculine principle of action, that they are still not all the way there. They haven't done enough work yet to get into that last stage of actually manifesting something to happen. These events aren't the end all. These are just the beginning, trying to get people together, trying to get the knowledge out there to people. This isn't going to be the solution itself. This is just a form and a methodology for educating people to like how we apply these solutions. But what it really comes down to is taking that sacred masculine principle of action and actually having boots on the ground and doing something about what's going on. So yes, we need to get out. We need to speak to people. We need to help spread this knowledge as far and wide, and this is one way that we can do that. There are many other ways that we can do this with our current advancements in technology, but it's not enough. Talking is not enough. Talking is not going to solve the issues. It's a start, but it's not going to actually change the condition. Human beings say that they want a certain condition to be present, both for themselves and their species as a whole. We always say that we want happiness, health, peace, freedom, prosperity. Human beings are absolutely in a state of ignorance to understanding and knowing the requirements that are necessary to manifest the condition they say they want. In order to manifest those conditions, we have to meet those requirements. And if those requirements are not met, then those conditions do not just manifest or automatically come into being by magical means. I'm always trying to inspire people to actually, go out and speak the truth, whether it's at a music fest or any type of event, skateboard competition. But it seems to me that a lot of people just want to be keyboard commandos, or what I like to call the mannequins of freedom, where they just go out and they just want to look the part. They just want to dress the part and look like the rebellious or look like the rebelling. But when you actually sit down and start to talk to them about these critical topics, whether it's political or spiritual, none of them seem to really have any firm foundation in the principles and the knowledge that's necessary for helping to, take down these psychopaths. People are stuck in this fear-based mindset, and because of that, they just want to continue to conform so they can live in their comfortable, mundane existence and not ever actually have to experience the hardship of doing the great work. Do you know what I mean?
I know exactly what you mean, yeah. I'm on the same page with you there about all that. So what is on the cards for this event in May then? Just run through some of the speakers and some of the other elements that are going to be happening there.
Well, we definitely have top caliber speakers coming to the event. We have Tony Palmentera, who is a crypto anarchist. He will be speaking upon the ideas of agorism to show when it is in your best interest to actually break the law, risk versus reward, etc. We have Sean McCann, who is going to be speaking upon mind control and the occult. He has a presentation called Occult Kubrick and the Butterfly Net. I believe that's what it's called. I could be incorrect about that, but he's going to be speaking about the Eyes Wide Shut movie and the hidden subversive subliminal symbolism within that movie, and talking about a lot of things like MK Ultra and many other social engineering techniques that go along with the cinema industry. We have Nathan Riddett, and he's going to be speaking upon the topics of entheogens, empathy, and hemp, and definitely slavery and natural law. And his work is very astounding. He has great presentations. He put together a really good natural law presentation, and which I really loved, and it was really awesome to see someone else doing something like that. We have Dylan McCormick, and he will be speaking on His presentation is called The Natural Rights of Self-Defense and Its Manifestation in the Second Amendment. We have Douglas Martin, who is my uncle. He was one of the individuals that helped influence my path of awakening. He will be continuing his presentation from the last S.E.E.D conference, which is called The Origins of Secret Society Part 2. And if you're interested in seeing any of the previous conference videos, you can go to skatopia.org and click on the S.E.E.D video link, and it will take you to the page where all the previous videos are. You can also find me personally on YouTube, Occulted Knowledge, and you will find, or you can just search for S.E.E.D videos and things like that on there, and you will find all the previous videos. But I recommend just going directly to my website and getting them. It's much easier. We have obviously you, who's going to be DJing and bringing in an amazing presentation. We have Indica Martin, who's going to be talking about her new book that she brought out, Give to Nature and Nature Will Give to You. It's a children's book, and it's an amazing book about teaching natural law principles to the youth. So she'll be speaking about that, and she definitely will have some books for sale at the event.
Okay. Shout to Indy. I got her book, and my kids have read it, so that's a great project.
Yes, it's very inspirational what she has done, and I think we need more people to actually be approaching the children with these principles and with the understanding of natural law very early on. So it's something I highly recommend people looking into. I will be speaking, and my presentation will be called Sight Beyond Illusions, and I'll be speaking upon epistemology, critical thinking, cognitive dissonance, teachability, and things that are steering around the foundational tools that we need to actually, understand and process this information that we're being bombarded with all the time. So I'll be speaking upon the trivium and things along that line. We have Nathan Kapp, who's also a family member. He will be giving a presentation called Re-Illumination of the Imagination, and he is going to bring something really, really good to the table. And I am very excited to see his work. He has really great work, and I think everybody should be definitely tuning in for what he has to bring to the table. We also have Mark Passio, who's going to be giving a presentation called Fake Ass Anarchist.
And Mark Passio is the keynote speaker on this one, right?
Yes, Mark will be headlining the event. I've been trying to get him out to the conference for a few years now, and he had made a promise or given me his word that he would make it out eventually. So that's why he has agreed to come out graciously to do this, and I'm super excited to have him finally, because he has been a big inspiration and a peer or mentor for a lot of the work that I'm doing.
And I think Mark Passio has said that this is going to be his last conference appearance for any outside promoter. He's only going to be doing his own events from this point forward that he puts together himself. So this is the last opportunity anyone's going to have to come and listen to him speak outside of his own events, which will probably take place in the Philadelphia area. So it's probably worth mentioning that about it.
No doubt. This is such a great opportunity for those who have not got to see him yet. I always try to let my friends know and other people know that have come across his work or that have been studying him for years that this is going to be his last speaking event outside of Philly, and they should not miss out on this opportunity.
Have you noticed many people that don't have a long-standing grounding in the anarchist and freedom movement getting more and more interested in these ideas in recent times? Because with a lot of these events, you can put them on year after year and you get pretty much the same crowd turning up, and it's people that have been on the path for years. Whereas the main aim always has to be bringing new people on board that have just woken up to these truths and are trying to instigate some changes in their behaviours and their lifestyles. Have you noticed much of an influx of new people to these movements in recent times?
Unfortunately, Mark, I have not noticed that big of an influx in the past few years. Like you said, it seemingly tends to be the same people that are coming to these events, but every once in a while I am starting to see new faces appear in small pockets. I think that the mass majority of people are still locked off in their own egotistical, selfish mentality from this knowledge. Most people tend to marginalize the occult or even anything pertaining to natural law or spirituality. And it's really sad to see, because that is where the solutions lie. Even within the anarchist punk skateboard community that I'm involved in, I was expecting to see a lot more people to engage and become initiated into the knowledge that is necessary to manifest freedom. And really, I haven't seen as many people as I would hope. I mean, I'm very disappointed even in some of the friends that I have. This definitely goes hand in hand with why there's not as many conferences taking place. But this is one main reason why I decided to hold the conference at a college campus, in hope to actually inspire and get people interested that are actually in the academic realm, like I was saying before.
Yeah, good move. So we'll come back to S.E.E.D at the end, and we'll just recap on where people can get tickets and how they can be a part of things. But in this conversation, we're connecting the freedom and anarchist movement with the punk rock scene, given that music genre is supposed to be all about anti-establishment sentiments, personal freedom and sovereignty, the DIY ethos, just not relying on outside sources, just doing for self and making things happen off your own back. So that's what that scene is supposed to be all about. But I've done a lot of research into it, and I've done previous shows, and I've got a long chapter in my book Musical Truth Volume 2 on the whole punk and new wave scene, at least the corporate manifestation of it, the scene coming through the major record labels and the household name artists that we've all heard of. And there's a lot of troubling things there, as anyone that's researched this will be familiar with. You have a lot of family connections through some of these key players, going back to the establishment and different expressions of the military-industrial complex and the security services and aspects of the government and all this, and secret societies and mystery schools and all this stuff. And you come to realize that scene has been infiltrated and controlled more than many other genres within the music industry. So isn't it ironic that it's supposed to be all about freedom and anarchy, but in actual fact it's one of the most controlled genres of all? And I've made this point many times before in shows that I've done, but the very name of the whole scene, punk rock, when you break down the origins of that word punk, you get some not too flattering manifestations of it. So I'll just recap on a few here. This is what I wrote in Musical Truth Volume 2. So if we consider the word punk, it's defined as a young man used as a homosexual partner, especially in prison, an aggressive and violent young man, an inexperienced young person, a cowardly or weak young man, an inferior, rotten, worthless person or thing, a petty criminal or hoodlum. And then to punk someone, the verb is defined as to humiliate, to dupe, or to deceive, to play a practical joke on. So I wonder if the application of that word to this scene indicates the true motives of those driving it at a corporate level. They're mocking the consumers of it, and they're just having a good laugh at the expense of people that don't know any better. There's a lot there, but you got any initial thoughts on all of that before we get into specifics?
Well, you completely hit the nail on the head. I've been looking into that for many years myself, like I said, being raised in this kind of environment. And I started to question everything about the movement and what was going on in the music industry and things like that, and all the mind control and all the family connections. And that's what I seem to have found as well, is that it was being controlled. It was a controlled narrative. And, I put out that presentation, Fake Ass Punks, and I got into a lot of that, showing the etymology of the word. And another part of that etymology is that it means rotting wood. And that's kind of, rotting wood is unusable, obviously. So it's nothing that can be really used for anything. You can't even burn it for a fire, So it's kind of a mockery, like you're talking about, a dark occult mockery to the people who are consuming this. And we can completely see that with, the new age and even the older punk movement, where we just become, most of us
consumers and mall punks, and it's all about style, and it's all about how you look, and it's all about how you dress, and what kind of hairstyle you have, and things like that, rather than an actual movement of fighting against the current iniquities and the totalitarian state that we're under. So I put it out there that most punks only pay like lip service to freedom, in the movement. They just want to look the part. They want to be, like I said earlier, just mannequins in the scene, and they want to feel good about this idea of rebellion, but they're not actually really stepping up and rebelling against anything. And that whole idea has been co-opted and used against us to make sure that we become more docile and more integrated into the system, which is very unfortunate.
Yeah, I've spoken many times before in lectures and in my book about what I term the disarmament tactic. And this is where you get musical groups served up to you, and they're products of the system, but they present the impression that they're on the side of the people. They're just like us. They're, rallying against the system and sticking it to the man and all this. And they put out songs that appear to carry those sentiments. But when you look into where these people have come from and their family connections and their affiliations, it tells a rather different story. And with a lot of bands, they'll put out a song or two of this nature every now and again to give the impression that they're on side with the people. But in between those songs, you'll find them adhering to different agendas and just propping up, different aspects of social engineering when they're not putting out these apparently conscious songs. So again, this is what's happening at a corporate level with many of these household names. But I guess there is going to be an underground scene. There are going to be bands that aren't well known, that are keeping it real, that are making music of a meaningful, uplifting nature. And they're the ones that will never get radio airplay. You'll never see them on TV. You won't see them filling stadiums. But they're out there doing their thing, and they are the genuine real deal, right? I mean, you coming from that scene, you would be aware of this more than anyone.
Well, when we look into the history of punk, we understand that it is directly derived from psychedelic rock. And I found that very interesting, and obviously probably a lot of your listeners and you obviously know about the entire mind control and social engineering agendas behind psychedelic rock and the hippie movement and things like that. But when you look at like some of the first punk bands and notice that they were completely funded and signed by major record companies and labels. It wasn't like some underground thing where they were doing it out of their basement. I mean, you find that more in the metal scene actually than in the early punk scenes. So it definitely wasn't a completely organic movement, which pretty much goes directly against the whole ideology of punk or the DIY ethos that you're speaking of. Definitely part of it was an antithetical birthing out of the pacifism that was arising in the late 60s and early 70s, which was probably being used to create a means of controlled opposition between the two ideologies. The punk movement was definitely steering more towards the extremities of individuality to the point of solipsism, and then vice versa, you have the hippie communities that were moving more into the communist and socialist mentalities, which they both ultimately meet in the end in some form or fashion in the ideas. One punk band I can think off the top of my head, it's more of a proto-punk band, is the Patti Smith Group. So people can look into that. I mean, there's so many that you can look at. It's pretty astounding. But once you start digging deep enough, you will find these Hollywood royal family connections, these connections to the think tank institutions, connections to the CIA and how they were involved with the initiation of the movement. The connections go so deep, it's profound. And like you said, the military-industrial complex has its fingers in almost everything. But early punk was definitely very self-absorbed and mainly revolved around taking a stand against something. Now, for me, in my roots in it, where there was some organic tendencies for freedom and understanding natural law and things like that, it was taking a stand against tyranny. It was taking a stand against conformity. It was taking a stand against the powers that be that are trying to control everything and trying to, govern every aspect of our lives.
Do you feel there are many musicians or bands that truly understand natural law teachings and hermetic principles and the concept of right action and all of this on a spiritual level, versus those punks that just want to rally against the system because they don't like government and they don't like paying taxes and they just want to be rebels for the sake of it because it's fashionable, because it's cool maybe, and all of this? I mean, what proportion of underground musicians out there do you feel have a real intrinsic understanding of these spiritual and sort of hermetic principles?
From my personal opinion, not many at all have an intrinsic understanding of the natural law principles or the hermetic arts or anything about spirituality, or let alone the occult. That's something I talked about in my Fake Ass Punks presentation, which people can find on YouTube and on my website, skatopia.org. The truth is that the overwhelming vast majority of so-called punks still do not recognize or comprehend the causal factors for human slavery, and thus they have no bearing on how to attain and maintain true freedom. The punk movement today, in my point of view, has no progression towards freedom because it's stuck in a deep self-absorbed psychopathology of, like what I was talking about before, narcissism, solipsism, egoism, hedonism, escapism. They are locked in the realm of effects or symptoms where there is no power to create real change. They think that the issues we face are only political and financial rather than spiritual problems rooted in our consciousness. And like you pointed out earlier, the whole idea of the term punk is a dark occult mockery towards individuals that are rebellious, and it really marginalizes a lot of the, individual freedoms that punks do share in their community at a certain level. So there are some positive aspects as well. I'm not just talking down upon punks 100%. Like we were talking about earlier, in the underground movements, there are some really good things going on. For the most part, it has been co-opted and assimilated into the culture, and it has been normalized and embellished to the point that it's become part of the exact ideologies that it was supposed to stand radically against. But to me, it just seems like these people have been pacified and become docile. The whole desire and will for true freedom is on the wane, or even becoming obsolete to the modern punk or even just modern rebel. So in my Fake Ass Punks presentation, I explained that a true punk is actually someone who does have the knowledge of natural law. I went through a bunch of tenets that I feel are characteristics of a true punk and contrasted them to the modern punk ideology and behaviors. But one of the main things is a true rebel. And what I mean by true rebel is somebody who has the willpower to act bravely or courageously in the face of slavery, and to actually get out and start to create actions that counteract that condition that we say we don't want. If we look at the etymological definition of the word rebel, we will find that that's what this means. So re meaning opposite or against or over again, back again, and bellare, which is rooted in dulum, which means quite good, quite brave, or actions of valor. This is also where we get our word duel from, because it is about waging war against mind control, really, is what it comes down to. And I mean, truth is always waging war against lies and deceit. So it's about returning to that state of mind where we can actually fight against or revolt against, which is another interesting word. This is where we get our word revolution from. And what I mean by this is a true revolution, a revolution of consciousness. But simply the word revolution means to overturn or to turn again. And there's some esoteric knowledge there too, because volt is also a charge of electricity. So it can also be a jump or a spark or an arc or something like that. But, I look at it as bringing in the energy that is needed, the electricity that is needed, the sacred masculine principle that is needed to actually take action to change the current condition. So a working definition of rebellion is repeating valorous actions that are quite good and brave, which fight and wage war against all mind control and slavery. But this is the entire problem with the whole punk, anarchist, and skateboard community that I'm involved in, is that they just want to sit back. They're more involved with entertainment rather than an actual message of truth. But instead of truly getting involved with a message of truth and actually the freedom movement, they would rather just go out on the weekends and hang out at these events and
go mosh at a concert or whatever, and then go back to their normal lifestyle and their slave job and their desk position, and just act like everything's okay from there. They think that rebelling is just going and listening to music, and that's not what the music that I've listened to and grew up on was trying to tell you. It was trying to tell you, hey, get involved and be action oriented, because this is going to take real world action to change anything.
Yeah, maybe we should have a new term: weekend punks for the weekend, and then back to the slave job Monday morning. Weekend punks.
Yeah, that sounds good. I like that.
Yeah. Are there any musicians, bands that you want to shout out that you feel do have a good grasp of these principles and are putting it into their empowering music? What sort of names have inspired you on those fronts?
Definitely like to give a shout out to Mark Passio's band, The Founders. They definitely brought me back around to the hardcore/punk scene, and I feel like they have a great message that they're putting out there. I definitely listen to a vast variety of types of music, not just punk anymore. I personally like Arch Enemy, which is more of a metal band. I think they have a great message, and they're doing some cool stuff right now. I also like an old band called Sons of Liberty, but they're not together anymore, but they definitely are worth listening to. I also would recommend my uncle's band, Resin, and you can find a couple of their videos on YouTube, and they're doing some shows now in the local area, I believe. But unfortunately, it just seems to me that most of the music coming out now has been mostly altered and is artifice or a proxy or using a lot of double speak. They're not actually what they say they are, and it just seems like there's so much mind control and social engineering running through it that there's not many bands I can honestly recommend.
Yeah, I mean, the dynamic you outlined there with the punk scene is replicated so many times throughout the music industry when you look at all these different scenes, and it's all very tribal. So certain people from certain demographics or backgrounds or certain personality traits are going to be attracted towards the punk scene. But then you've got scenes like the hip-hop movement, which has gone pretty much the same way. A lot of that is very corporate and artificial and pushing social engineering agendas now, and very different to how that scene started out. It was social and political in the statements that it was making initially. It was very cultural. It was a whole lifestyle for certain communities, but it's splintered off into so many different areas now. And then you've got the dance music scene, the house music, rave scene, the party scene, which started out with ideals and principles. It was all about breaking free from society and expressing yourself and unplugging from the system and all this. But that's also become very corporate and homogenized, and it's kind of lost its way. So it's ingenious how you've had all these different scenes and movements served up, and depending on your background and your cultural traits, you're going to gravitate to one scene or another if you're a young person, it seems. All grounds have been covered, and once you get attached to one of these scenes, unless you're paying attention and unless you're a very strong character with principles, you're liable to get swept along with the wave, along with everybody else, and you're going to find yourself in the middle of a whole bunch of agendas. Does that make sense?
It absolutely does, and I see it all around the punk scene, especially here in America. And, I tried to tackle this in my presentation, that there is a dark occult agenda, within these movements to socially engineer the subclass of people, and as well as many others. I like a lot of really good hip hop and different types of rap that actually are, steering around real freedom and a real message that they're trying to put out there. One of the people I listen to a lot is K Reno. He puts out a great message, and you just never hear about. Yeah, you never hear about him or any person like that on mainstream like you're talking about.
Most people just don't understand the enemy they face.
and how it's an interconnected worldwide group of occult master psychologists who hold and wield this knowledge, and they're seeking to create a power differential amongst these classes of people and divide them and balkanize these ideas so that everybody fights with each other about the ideas rather than unifying and becoming together and coming together to actually fight. They want to make sure to split us all up into these different categories, compartmentalize us so that we start to bicker with each other, and then there is no real movement, there is no real power to create change from that. So they're exploiting the entire idea that the punks and these other types of rebellious and truth, people who are actually out there trying to do something good. So they've exploited all that and used it against us. And that's why you have to know your enemy, and you have to know that these tactics are very sophisticated and they know exactly what they're doing. And that's why we need to be educated to the tactics of mind control so we can steer away from that and we can actually counteract that and have defenses against that.
I had a guest on probably a couple of years ago now talking about the punk and new wave scene, and he was really going into some of these big name acts that we all know, going back to the early days, the late 70s, going into the 80s, and he was talking about how at many of the live shows from these acts you would have tables and stalls set up by the likes of Planned Parenthood, different abortion groups, feminist groups, LGBTQ organisations. And they'd be pushing all these social engineering agendas at these punk concerts, which goes completely against what the ethos of punk is supposed to be all about. It's not supposed to be about running agendas. It's supposed to be about personal freedom. And you've got the likes of, Planned Parenthood and bloody Bill and Melinda Gates putting out leaflets and DVDs and stuff at punk concerts. I mean, what the fuck is that all about?
It's funny that you bring that up. I definitely see that more and more. The frequency of things like that happening at the punk shows and things like that are ramping up. And I definitely see that the whole idea of freedom of expression, or the supposed freedom of aesthetics and expression and sexuality, definitely was injected into our society and into our culture through the punk movement and through this whole genre. And this is definitely an epidysgenics agenda. And dysgenics is about breeding the population down. It's about breeding horrible traits and characteristics through the manipulation of human biology and consciousness through things like chemicals in our food, water, and air. And in addition, radionic fields that interfere with and change the human psychology for the worst. I should have given a caveat to that, but, I always like to say that as long as it's in harmony with natural law, then I have no issue with it. So anybody can freely choose, based off consent, moral consent, their own sexual association and things like that. But as soon as you get into the hairy grounds and the rough waters of trying to force your beliefs onto other people, force them to say certain words that you want them to say, or you're going to be offended and things like this, that's when you start to see freedom decline. And we can see this epidysgenics warfare being utilized by parents, people who are using, puberty or hormone blockers on their children, which is just absolutely deplorable. So I always try to make light of this to especially my friends that are transgender or gay, that, they are being manipulated. They're being used in this biological war and psychological war to actually further the agenda and to actually degrade freedom. In the underground scenes, you don't really see too much of this, but definitely in the mainstream scene, you see this quite a bit. And we obviously know how these people work. They go right to the state and try to bolster to the idea of authoritarian control to get their way or their ability to have freedom of expression, which is also completely antithetical to the punk movement and punk ideology, in my point of view. And we see these things in the underground movement as well, with bands like Dead Kennedys. The lead singer, Jello Biafra, is a Green Party supporter. He loves democracy and he supports it wholeheartedly. And it seems to me like his message was completely opposite of actually supporting any forms of authority. And we know that democracy is just mob rule by the most ignorant. So, like being raised in this kind of community, I always asked questions, and these questions always came against a firm barrier of these people's own ignorance and obviously their lack of true knowledge and education in these realms, and probably the lack of true willpower and courage to actually stand up and fight against this in the correct way. So they definitely remind me of the cowardly lion, which is pretty much the archetype of the modern American or the modern person in the entire world, one who has no courage. But for some more interesting information pertaining to these topics, I would recommend the book Weird Scenes Inside the Canyon. I would also recommend looking into John Adams and Nero, the history of punk music. And you should have a plethora of things to, study from these two things alone.
Sure. All right, brother. I think we're probably about done there. Just to recap on the S.E.E.D event, though, to return to that, do you want to let people know where they can go to get tickets? And we'll just recap on the whole thing and the dates and the location and all this.
S.E.E.D for Growth, Studying, Educating, Enlightening, and Discerning will be taking place May 29th through 31st at the Athens Baker University. There will be top caliber speakers including Mark Passio, Douglas Martin, Nathan Kapnicki, and many more. You can find tickets at eventbrite.com. All you have to do is search for S.E.E.D for Growth and make sure to add the periods in between the S.E.E.D for then growth, and it should bring it up directly. If not, narrow your search down by placing in the location, Athens, Ohio. You can also find tickets and links to tickets on Facebook. Do the same thing, just search for S.E.E.D for Growth, and you can find a direct link from my main page and my main website, skatopia.org. This conference is going to be a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. I'm trying to make it the biggest and the best one yet, and I really look forward to seeing like-minded individuals come and help support this event and help support the speakers and honestly just help to educate people, to get through to people's hearts and minds, to help end slavery, to spread the knowledge of natural law. And this will be Mark Passio's last speaking event out of Philadelphia, so I wouldn't want to miss out on that either. And just to make it clear to individuals that are curious about this, I'm not making any money off of this event. All the money goes directly to the speakers and to pay for the location charge or any other expenses that come along with putting on an event of this caliber. I'm not in this to make money. This isn't about being a charlatan. This is about education and enlightenment. My profit comes from knowing that I've helped reach people with this information.
Yeah, I commend you on all that. Much respect for putting this together, and it's just the way I would choose to spend a weekend. I'm greatly looking forward to it. Just the kind of event that I would want to be at the state I'm at in my life now. Hasn't always been the case, but that's where I'm at in 2020. So hope to see a lot of good people there. Looking forward to meeting yourself. I'm looking forward to catching all the other speakers and all the other events going off. So that's 29th to 31st of May this year. It's going to be incredible, man. So thank you for coming on the show today.
Thank you so much, Mark, for this opportunity to come on and help shed some light on the event and what I do personally. And I look forward to seeing some of your future content. I can't wait to check out your new book that you have out. And hopefully maybe we can do this again sometime.
This is just for fun. I'm picking up vibrations. I'm picking up